Okay, great. Well, welcome to the University of Press as we host Peter Charles Hoffer, How to Recognize a History Zombie. And Peter Hoffer will be shining a light on zombie history. And the Author Live Talk series takes place on Thursdays at 11 a.m. ETD. We're running these sessions from June to August of this year. And we're excited to launch these, and we'll continue to do so as demand dictates. So welcome everyone. Thank you for being part of our first inaugural series this year. Our aim is to really connect you all with the University of Press authors, to engage the material, to engage the books, and as we have tools for interaction, to do this in a live format. We also offer these books within our University of Press ebook collection, which we'd like to share with you. And it's free to read for these books until August 31st. So you're able to log in. You can actually follow along by reading and view the book as we discuss it. And we will have polls in this session, and we encourage you to participate as you feel. So we'll start off with a poll, and we'd like to get to know our audience a little bit better. It helps us in our conversations with you, and it helps us contextualize your Q&A and gives Peter some signs of kind of where things are going in terms of the communities and of practice. And so I'm going to go ahead and launch this poll, and the question really is, what is your primary role? And go ahead and take your time and answer that for us. And as we answer those questions, I just wanted to point you that you can read along on Fulcrum. This is the book's DOI, which is the unique identifier for the book. You can follow us on Twitter, and this recording will be available on YouTube, so please subscribe. And you will find other author talks there as well. All right, we're nearly there. We've got about 66% people voting here. I think we might have reached, oh, we're nearly there. I'm gonna give a couple more seconds here. All right, so I captured about 80% of us. I'm gonna go ahead and share the results. As you can see, we have a nice split between researchers and scholars, professors, instructors, and publisher, and a handful of library employees and authors from the press themselves. Wow, awesome. This is really great. So we do have an academic scholarly community. We have a learning community here reflected in our audience, and so thank you for that. And just to say a little bit about the University of Michigan Press for all of you. And we were founded in 1930, and we've been part of the library since 2009. And my colleague, Sean, has our anniversary banner displayed in his background, so we're quite happy to celebrate our 90th anniversary this year. We publish around 100 books, and we have published over 5,000 titles to date. And key strengths are political science, performing arts, classics, archaeology, American studies, African studies, and Asian studies. So this talk is history, but it's in the political science vein, and we have a growing history collection, as Charles would attest to, our director, as well as we are joined today by Elizabeth Demers, our editorial director. She's joining us today. Also, we have English language teaching and a small trade list, and that's mainly about the U.S. Great Lakes region. And as a press, we're committed to digital scholarship, so you'll find throughout the presentation ways that we're using these ebooks in innovative ways, and including open access. So all the books that are in the presentation are featured in the University of Press ebook collection, and you can access it via Fulcrum. It's the open source community platform that we've developed at Michigan. And a lot of the books will, including this one, will have zoomable images and 3D models and things that you can interact with. And of course, you can read and download open access titles. All right, so I'm gonna hand it off to Professor Peter Charles Hoffer. He's a distinguished research professor of history at the University of Georgia. And again, his title of his book is Zombie History, Lies About Our Past That Refused to Die. Peter, over to you.
Okay. Thank you for letting me do this and for helping me through it. This is a book that was, I guess 20, 25 years in the works. Written, rewritten, added to, dropped as I went on to other projects. What is a zombie history? A zombie history is a collection of false facts. False facts are facts that resist remediation. You can't prove them wrong, and that's what makes them interesting. Historians, as you know, don't just do one damn fact after another. We ask why. Why questions with respect to zombie history are, why is it that some of us persist in believing things about our past that are palpably false? And the answer is, for some of those people, they need to believe it. It's an essential part of how they see their world and how they fit into it. So that's zombie history. Zombies are hard to kill. I'm not sure that this book actually kills any zombies. The point of the book is to throw light on them so that readers know where they came from, why people persisted in believing them, and what historians have done or not done to slay them. Now, the second topic, history teaching and learning faces its most serious crisis. That's what sort of propelled me into finally turning this into a publishable manuscript and hopefully a readable book. Our enrollments are down at a time when we desperately need to know about our history. I mean, look around. History is all around. You can't ignore it. Analogies to earlier pandemics, the persistence of racial profiling and race hate. These things really are part of our history, and the students are not coming into our classes. They're not majoring in history, and that too is something we have to deal with. The third of the points, influence on public policy, has dwindled, and our trust of students is almost gone. I know that sounds hyperbolic, like I'm in these days of panic mode. That sounds a little panicky, but it's something that historians are talking about. Where has our influence gone? We used to think that, okay, it went to political scientists and economists. Now perhaps it's gone to people who study epidemics. But we still have a message, and we'd like that message to be taken seriously. The next is, if we see the zombies for what they are, we may be able to reclaim our place. That's the hope. I think that some Black Lives Matter and that movement, and the way it has not just become a shared movement and a shared moment in our history, but it may help us to slay at least the zombie called Jim Crow, which is an inherently racist and derogatory zombie, but you still see it. I'll tell you a story. If you enter the University of Georgia by the arches, you'll see a historical plaque, and the historical plaque talks about the history of the University of Georgia. And when it gets to the Civil War, it says, "The War for Southern Independence." That's a zombie, and it has persisted through various changes in the face of the plaque. And there are still many groups who say, well, it was a war for Southern independence. And it's almost impossible to slay that. It will keep on going. And it's not, you get all kinds of very clever arguments for it, but it's just, well, first of all, there were plenty of Southern places that didn't rebel. So to call it Southern independence. Second, it never would have happened without slavery, because if you look at the various declarations of secession, they're all about the fear that the Republicans would do something to create slave rebellion or to end slavery, where Lincoln was saying, by the way, Lincoln was also a Southerner from Kentucky, Indiana, and then Illinois. The southern part of Illinois was Southern. And he said he wasn't going to touch slavery. So can't kill that zombie. Now, here is, I think on the screen, everyone can see Frederick Douglass, who was an amazingly handsome guy. And I thought of putting him on my webpage when people say, well, what do you look like? Well, I'd like to look like Frederick Douglass, but I look like me. Also a fantastic orator, something that we who teach in classrooms could learn from. Anyhow, when I got to the University of Georgia from Notre Dame, I came down here, and the people were very nice. And I taught my first 300-person lecture, and the folks were there, and I was reading from Frederick Douglass's autobiography, the last version of which is a deeply moving book. And he describes what happened as the older black woman who was taking care of him left him on a plantation, left him alone. And for children, we know that being abandoned is their worst fear. And he writes about it so movingly. And I was reading it to the class, and the entire back row of this lecture room, all of them white men wearing tractor caps, gets up en masse, marches out. And I was my expression was you can see me, sort of stunned. And then I realized this was a protest. For them, this was all about Southern heritage. The University of Georgia was a Southern heritage reproducing place, and I was offending them. I guess I'm happy that no one challenged me to a duel. But that struck me. And yes, I keep on reading that passage. And what I've noticed is that the students now are engaged. No one gets up and leaves. So yes, there is progress. Yes, we can slay some of the zombies. I think I've gone through your talking points. Oh, there's another set of talking points. My. What is history? History is three things. Okay, everything is three things. Nothing is two things. Nothing is four things. Everything is three things. First of all, it's what happened in the past. It's how people thought and felt, what they did, what happened to them. Second, it's our study of the past. So it's about the methods that we use, our teaching, and our learning, how students learn about the past. Third, it is what we write about the past. That's scholarship. So it's all those three things. And the book, Zombie History, is actually about all three things. It's about what happened. It's about how we study what happened. And it's about how historians have written about what happened. Why is it important? Because without history, you're an amnesiac. You don't understand who you are or where you fit in or where you've come from. There was a famous historian who said, everyone is their own historian. And we are. That's why the study of history is important. It's not important because the Board of Regents at the University of Georgia says that all the students have to study it. That's not why it's important. Okay, why do historians disagree? You could say, well, all history is a matter of opinion. Well, that's your opinion, that's my opinion, and we disagree. Historians disagree in a particular way. Each generation of historians quarrels with its predecessor and makes the history a little better. So bit by bit, jump by jump, not a steady progression. So for example, we have discovered, our generation, not my generation of younger historians has discovered how important slavery was to the economic development, not just of the South, but of the entire country. And that is a step beyond what historians taught in the 1950s, even in the 1960s. So it's not a matter of opinion. It's a matter of appreciated, growing understanding. So it gets better. If you compare the textbooks now, our college textbooks now, with the textbooks from the 1950s, covering the women have entered into the textbooks. Slavery is important. Immigration is important. Urban life is important. So the textbooks have also obviously gotten bigger, and they've gotten so much better. The last of the talking points, I hope because I'm losing my voice, is can we ever kill the history zombies? Some people need these zombies, and they cling to them. And that's what keeps the zombies alive. I can talk all I want. I can write all the books I want. All the historians can write all the books. We can fill libraries if we can find publishers, which is another problem. I want to say thanks to the University of Michigan Press for becoming a strong history publisher. We need more of you guys, thanks. So we can't kill all of them, but maybe we can kill them one at a time. And that makes us, I think, a better, kinder, more understanding people, because we do live in a world that's a country that's diverse and can be more inclusive, more mutually supportive.
Thank you, Peter. So we'll take the time here to ask you all. I know you all, some of you may have read the book, browsed the book, or curious, and we're just curious, what history zombie are you most interested in hearing more about? I'm going to go ahead and launch the poll, and so give Peter and us a chance to understand a little bit more about your interests today. We do have a couple of case studies we'll prepare and talk through, and then we do have a spot in the presentation where we can take some Q&A on some of these zombies. So come on, there we go. I'm getting some results in.
I heard
Nice.
you on.
Lovely. I'm going to get as much as I can. I want to get at least 80% participation here, just so I can do good here. All right, we're nearly there. In the last minute, I know where some people, oh yes, somebody made a decision. Awesome. Looks like we have a raised hand here. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end the polling and share results. All right, so interestingly, we've got 40% of us are interested in postmodern zombies and 47% modern zombies. Wonderful. And a handful are interested in Civil War and Reconstruction zombies. So this is very interesting. So this will be good. This will be a treat because we have a couple case studies that are from the Civil War Reconstruction era. And we do want to spend some time a little bit and offer a discussion for perhaps the modern and postmodern. Okay. Peter.
Hi, Natalie. That's my wife.
Oh, wonderful. She's raising her hand. I didn't know if she
Yeah.
had something to say.
Yeah.
Okay, good. She hasn't chatted with me. So Natalie, if you do have a question or a comment, please put it into the chat and we're happy to take it from there.
All right.
Yes. Thank you. Go ahead, Peter.
Okay. Sambo, the docile slave who loved his or her master, and that was a staple, not just of pre-Civil War writing. The Moonlight and Magnolias school of romantic writing, but also after the war, if you looked at historians of the South, Southern literary figures, movie makers like D.W. Griffith and so on, Sambo was their zombie. Why did they believe that? I mean, people who lived, worked with slaves, knew that slaves had personality. They were people. They were people like everyone else. They weren't especially docile. Some were good workers. Some were not so good workers. Some were wonderful storytellers. Some were wonderful listeners. But the idea that they loved his or her master made slavery easy to swallow. If you said that the slaves really wanted more than anything else to be free, then you're imprisoning people. You're forcing them to work against their will. You're not a good person if you're doing that. So that's why Sambo persists. I think that we've pretty much gotten rid of that, but you still see it. You still see it. You still hear it in lectures, mostly by sort of popular lecturers, not by academics, not by professional historians. But there's so much history that comes in the form of someone giving a talk, an amateur historian giving a talk, and you'll see that. Okay, so what's the systematic impact on Black identity and power? Black folks, if you look at 1619, the New York Times series and so on, they realize that this is a zombie, and that this zombie denies to not just their ancestors, but all of the slaves agency, identity, and the power that they negotiated over their own lives. So hopefully this is one that we're not going to see so much of anymore. So
Peter,
yeah.
we have a question from a panelist, Natalie, and it might be good to answer it now since it seems in context. Would you be willing to take it? I can read it to you. I'll read it out loud. It says, the lost cause ideology surrounding the Confederate monuments. There's a lot of discussion around this. What is this, and what is its impact on whites and blacks in our society?
The Confederate monuments were not erected, the monuments and the plaques and everything, were not erected immediately after the war. Most of them were erected in the great period of Jim Crow, which is between 1900 and World War I, as a way of restating the value and the honor of the Confederacy. And, of course, reinforcing, because you look at them, white supremacy. And then some of them reappeared in the 1950s, again, as a response to the rising civil rights movement. So they were zombies that were actually created out of historical facts. I mean, there was a Robert E. Lee, but then to put him on a horse and put him there on the highest part of that part of Richmond so that everyone can see him, that's a zombie. Now, the Lost Cause was something invented by a Southern author. He called it the Lost Cause right after the war. And again, the argument was that the Confederacy and that secession was somehow an honorable act. It was a cause, and it was lost. But its value, its greatness should not be forgotten. So that's a zombie. The Lost Cause is a zombie. Zombies aren't necessarily just people. They can be ideas. The black man as an invisible man, that's a zombie. That's created by certain people in order to derogate, to denigrate, to dismiss black men. So I mean, that's a good question. I have to say that. But no, it's an excellent question. We've actually discussed this. Now, the war between the states, there was no war between the states. Maine and Georgia did not declare war on one another. Maine farm boys and Georgia farm boys did kill one another. The War of Southern Independence, or as it's known in the North, the War of the Great Rebellion, was in fact a civil insurrection. It was always treated that way by the federal government. And then when the Southerners who had engaged in, well, I guess what amounted to treason, were reintegrated into the nation, it was still considered a civil insurrection. The Confederacy never existed as a sovereign state. No other sovereign state, not England, not France, not Italy, not Russia, no other southern state, no other sovereign nation recognized the Confederacy as a fellow sovereign nation. Except, I think, New Grenada, which was made up of Colombia and Panama. So, event that never happened? Yes. Federal Constitution denied the states the authority to declare or wage war, except as insurrectionists within the state. That is true. See, the war between the states is not just false. You know, a false thing can be corrected. You produce evidence, test, and it's corrected. It's a fake. It's produced and argued by people who know that it's wrong and persist in it. And that's what makes it a zombie. And it preserves the memory of the South as the last great white aristocracy. Is that still Natalie asking these questions?
I'm going to go ahead and open it up. If there's questions from the attendees around the zombies that you all identified. So this is something new for us. We are leaving an open Q&A right now, and just for about 5 minutes or so, we'll just take questions you all identified that you're interested in. I can share the results here again. Looks like modern zombies, postmodern zombies, and Civil War and Reconstruction zombies were the top category of zombies. Peter, you've got plenty of examples. Oh, wonderful. We do have we have a question. Actually, no, I just have a note. Thank you. Good. Okay. Well, Peter, is there any particular postmodern zombie that, or modern zombie that you're itching to share? I know your book is crammed full with greatness in the back there, and I think we oftentimes don't get to history at this postmodern period. So is there at least one zombie in there?
That was hard to write. That chapter was hard to write because I respect the work of just about everyone who's in that chapter. Let me single out, at great risk to myself, but I'm old and my career is almost over, Richard White. He's a magnificent historian. We all use his book on the Indians of the Upper Great Lakes. And he's won many prizes. But his most recent work, and I'm looking at it, the Republic for which it stands, a part of the Oxford, I shouldn't mention another publisher, but Oxford University Press, a wonderful series on U.S. history. Everything is bad. Everything is, the Gilded Age America is a terrible place. I don't know why all those immigrants came. Obviously, they made a mistake. It's full of the oppression of minorities, of newcomers, and everything in it is turned around so that it sort of reads like one of the New York Times headlines. New York is opening up, but is it too soon? It's sort of that after the comma. And he does this throughout. He does a brilliant job of it. And it's very convincing, except if you know about Gilded Age history. And you know the tremendous wealth that was produced. But it did filter down. And you know that it did bring so many people, including my ancestors and Natalie's ancestors, to America. It was for them the land of opportunity. And I remember a quote, one of them saying, "So much meat." They had never had that in Europe, in the Pale, and that was part of their diet here. I'm not saying that it was wonderful for immigrants, but I'm saying that it was a land of opportunity, and you would not get that from this book. So what's the zombie? The zombie is despair. The zombie is read this and despair. Nothing. Go ahead.
I do have a few questions for you that are coming in here, and let's tackle them as they came in. So the first question: do actions such as taking down Confederate monuments or banning Gone with the Wind help defeat zombies?
The short answer is yes. The long answer is typically more complicated. Um, the images are still there. You'll find them on the web. I think the thing to do is not to forget who these people were. I think we need to remember who these people were. I think we need to, they're part of, remember the first definition of history, what happened? They're part of what happened. They're part of the history. And if you erase them, then you sort of erase the reason for the protests. You erase the reason for the upswelling of genuine dismay at the honoring of these people. Jefferson Davis is gone. Well, we've lost the argument against, the defense of slavery. So, yeah, I don't think they should be in the places that they're in. Put them in museums. Put them in the Garden of Remembrance. But where they are now is they represent the kind of public investment in that lost cause that we talked about. A kind of honoring of that lost cause. So I don't think you need to put graffiti all over them. I'm not a big fan. I'm from New York City, so I'm not a big fan of graffiti. But they don't belong where they are. I don't know if that's a sufficiently nuanced answer. We could go on about this. Historians have been talking about this among ourselves. There is no general agreement. I'm in favor of, removing them, but don't touch U.S. Grant's statue because that's where we went after we were married. We went from getting married to the Grant Monument up in Upper Manhattan and so on. So the tomb of U.S. Grant and his wife. Don't touch that. Okay, but otherwise.
I have another question. Thank you, Peter. It sounds like historians are still split then, essentially, on the role of those monuments and kind of the impact they have of their removal. And I think your comment around the proper placement and situation and context around this is really useful for us. What is an example of a postmodern zombie? Perhaps you can elucidate a little bit in terms of what you've written in your book. Pull one out, maybe.
Well, there are a whole series of them. Despair was my first one. Mass data, mega data was another one of them. Some of these are kind of infra-dig. They're among people who work in the field. Like we're all going to be saved by mega data, which is manipulated by giant machines, and it's going to produce all these obvious results. The problem is that we used to have this old saying when we did this at the Newberry Institute where I went, it's garbage in, garbage out. You have metadata, which is a collection of data which may or may not reflect anything, which may or may not be reliably collected. You compile it, you manipulate it, and then you shove it out there, and it's supposed to tell us. Sometimes one story, one anecdote tells us so much more, but megadata becomes a zombie. It's a postmodern zombie. Certain kinds of memes that we've been seeing online, they become zombies, and they're reproduced over and over again. And we know how you can manipulate images on the web. There was one case just recently of a young fellow who was happens to ride his bicycle in the park, and someone decided that he looked like the fellow who rode his bicycle into the protesters, and his image reappeared, was tweeted and retweeted thousands of times, falsely, of course, because he had nothing to do with it. And finally, the Attorney General of the state of Maryland had to go on and say, no, that's not someone who did it. We've indicted the person who did it. And do you know how many people retweeted that, the apology? 228. So thousands of people jumped on this guy, flocked him, mobbed him, because someone found his Twitter address, and terrible things they said to him. So that kind of meme is a zombie, and it ain't going to go away. So we keep creating these new zombies. I go on and on, but
sure. Well, this is interesting, because I think a lot of what I'm seeing here in the question is trying to reconcile and grapple with this zombie necessary, unnecessary, and this question is really at that. So how do we reconcile the either or dichotomy in history, as you discuss in the postmodern zombie discussion? How do you reconcile with that?
Well, I mean, hopefully people take a look at the book, and now that you've made it available free online, they'll turn to that chapter and start thinking about some of these things, that we don't want to create new zombies. Well, I'll mention one more. I believe that most of our inequalities are based upon maldistribution of wealth, and that maldistribution of wealth is intentional. I mean, if you look at the tax reform, which is not tax reform, which is tax breaks for the very wealthy, and that explains so much. But other people think that not just class, but race and gender. And I use the word gender carefully now, because that's become almost a zombie. People attacking one another for misusing the term gender. Anyhow, the argument is that where you find economic inequality, you will always find race prejudice. And the historical fact is that if you look into our history, you will find this. But then essentialism says it's always there. They're always combined. And there are plenty of societies in this world where you see that kind of wide disparity in wealth, maldistribution of wealth with the consequent social norms, where you don't have racial differences. These are homogeneous societies. So this is called intersectionality, and it has become the watchword of many historians. But it's tiptoeing toward becoming a zombie. It explains everything. Another old zombie that's out there, for me, and this should trigger some questions, is strict Marxism, which says that it's always about struggle for control of the means of production. And that the end of history is this communist society, where everything is evenly distributed. And that's just not historical fact. If it's an ideology, we understand that. We explain the ideologies. We explained that it was, industrial world, and it looked like that. We understand Marx as a great thinker and a moral philosopher and so on. But when you turn that into a history, and that becomes your history, for example, for the people in Marho, the Marxist Historical Organization, that's a zombie. That's to me. Now, these are postmodern things. And I hope that when people read the book, they'll engage with it. They'll say, oh, he's right about this, but he's wrong about that. Or he just doesn't understand this. Or I hope that they don't say, well, he doesn't understand this because he's invincibly ignorant, because he can't understand this. I'm always willing to listen to reasoned argument, or even someone that says, well, you're wrong.
These two questions are great ways of restating the same question, which this may be hard for you. Of all the things you've been discussing here, is what history zombie would you say is the most or worst damaging in how it persists today? And the second question is, what is the most egregious zombie in American history?
I think the most egregious is Jim Crow. I think the one that frightens me most now is history as despair. History as it's all bad. Because if you if you accept that, then why study history? It's all bad. You can't learn anything from it's all bad because there's nothing to compare it with. If it's all bad then it's all bad now. And it's going to be all bad in the future. Why engage with this at all? Let's all learn computer science. Get rid of the history departments, which is what's happening, by the way, across this country. They're bundling history with the other social sciences or something like that. And or some places, I can name them, but I won't, because then you'll get really nasty calls. They're just getting rid of the history departments. Some of this financial stuff is a way to get rid of tenured historians. Yes, we feel threatened.
So Peter, this is a tough one, and this is definitely out of my league, as my background is not in history or historiography, but I feel like this is maybe a methods question. So interpretation can be zombies, but interpretation is the soul of historiography. Can you help us grapple with maybe the methods of studying history in of itself being a zombie, or is there something that we should be understanding more about this approach that you're outlining?
There's an old story about a rabbi who was listening to a couple describe their marital problems. And the husband laid out his case. And the rabbi said, yes, you're right. And then the wife laid out her case. And he said, yes, you're right. And then the Rebbitzin, who's listening to this, says to the rabbi, that's the rabbi's wife, how can you say that they're both right? And he says, you know, you're right. So, yeah, method can be a zombie. If the method is narrowly focused and you know where you want to go before you take the first step, and you're locked into an ideological point of view, providential history, this is what God wanted, economic determinism, this is the struggle of the classes. I mean, if you're locked into that, then yes, the method can be a zombie. So, you know, when I say that this is a zombie and this isn't, this is false and this is fake, that's me. And my hope is, when I wrote this and rewrote this and rewrote this, is that this would stimulate discussion. It's not the first time I've written about historical methods. Sometimes if I told stories about people who, you know, plagiarized or made up stuff, yeah, that got an audience. But when I went into deeper discussions about, you know, the problematic of history, how can we ever know about the past? I lost my audience. The books didn't sell, they didn't get reviewed, whatever. So I said, let me be sort of provocative. Let me throw some things out there which are, you know, argumentative, and let's see if people engage with that. Let's see if we can start talking about, thinking about how we do history and how we can do it better. And this book represents that effort.
Wonderful. Peter, this is a really great question. This is coming into kind of juxtaposing some of the theory and observations you have against maybe another discipline. So how does the concept of zombies relate to the sociological theory of functionalism, especially structural functionalism, from someone who has heard this version of the rabbi story in a sociology class? Thank you.
It's a wonderful story. You see, sociology can be, now I'm not a sociologist, so, you know, I'm sort of looking in the window, the sociology building is right across from mine. We historians are empiricists. Our empiricism, you know, we don't tend to be theorists. Sociologists, political scientists, and economists are social scientists, and they tend to be theorists. There are 15 different definitions of functionalism. Some are philosophical. Sociology has a variety of them. So I think it's a great question, but my response would be to and this is sound academic, and I apologize for it. My response to your questioner would be, define functionalism. So I know which functionalism, which school of functionalism I have to deal with.
Structural functionalism. Does that help? I'm trying here.
Okay.
Uh-oh.
Structuralism comes not from sociology, but from anthropology. The origin is Claude Lévi-Strauss, as I understand it. And it was that there were certain structures that were built into social institutions, human society, and that those structures were always there. For me, that's a form of, I'm going to throw out another term, essentialism, that there are certain things that are always there. You can't avoid them. So, for example, class is always there. Well, I mean, we invented the word class. It was invented in the 18th century by a group of emerging, we would call them now social scientists, they call themselves political economists. And so to historicize this excellent question, we never use structural functionalism. At least I haven't seen it. I could go on the web into history books and look for it. The other place that I think it comes from is literary criticism. Literary criticism is now a foreign country for most historians, even for intellectual historians. Cultural historians know a lot about it. It comes to us from France after World War II. And it's frankly a mystery to me, because we want to contextualize the things that we write about. We want to bring in what's happening around them. And a lot of modern literary theory is to decontextualize, to take literature, pieces of literature as connected over time and place by structures. I think that's wonderful. I think that gets you published. Getting published is the way to get tenure. Getting tenure is the way to last in this business, not to have to teach 4-4. But so I really don't have an answer. Again, ask your questioner if there's, in asking me this, is there sort of, is there an argument behind the question? Because I'd be happier dealing with that. I mean, I won't be offended, or I don't think it's out of court for your questioner to say, well, don't you think that, or something like that. I know you have a whole list of things for the questioners, don't think in terms of, groups and everything else. But
well, it sounds like the question was just simply to just kind of juxtapose the two and to just say how they relate. And I think you've answered the question. I'd like to move on to the next question, which is the last question I see, which is, what advice would you give a person who wanted to embark on a career as a historian on how to navigate the zombie landscape?
Yes is my advice. If you love history, if you love reading it, you will love doing research in it. If you're like me, you really like writing. If writing is hard for you, you'll come to like writing. There's a secret that we historians have. It's a secret passion, secret pleasure. It's in our minds. Sometimes physically we're able to go back in time, to be in a time and place. One of the things I do is what's called sensory history, where we try to recreate in words and pictures what it was like then. And except for people who do cultural anthropology, no other scholarly field does that. And that is wonderful. So I say, yes, follow your passion.
We have time for one last poll here while everyone is still engaged. And we'll go ahead and launch that. The question is, Hoffer suggests that, quote, zombie history will not triumph in the end, end quote. Do you all agree? Let's take some time to take the last remaining poll here, and then we're going to move into wrap up and talk a little bit about how to actually support the book in your local bookstores. So let's see what results we've got here. 20 more seconds here just to see if we can get just a little bit more participation. Vote your conscious, folks. Your first instinct. It's a good question. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and end the polling at 58%. Ooh, it's split. I knew it. Most folks are split, Peter. Yes, 43% and maybe unsure, 43%. You think that's fair? Peter?
I don't know. Maybe unsure.
Yeah.
Maybe in unsures, because I vote with the maybe. You don't allow me to vote on these things, I see.
No.
How about hopefully?
That's good. Well, at least we're moving in the right direction. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Sean, and he's going to give a little bit of detail around how to get this book.
Well, thanks, Linnell, and thanks to Peter for the wonderful talk and for all of you in attendance. As we have mentioned, the book is free to read on fulcrum.org through the end of August, but if you would like your own copy, you can order it on our website, press.umich.edu, and receive 30% off using the code UMZombieVA. You can also order the book through your local shop, and we provide a link to Ann Arbor's own literati bookstore through the bookshop.org presence, which benefits local and independent shops with every order. And I think, yeah, so if you'd like a copy, that is how to order it.
Thank you, Sean, and thank you, Peter, and thank you everyone for joining us today. Once again, just want to say thank you for engaging these issues and history and engaging in such a discussion. We're happy that you all showed up. And the book again is Zombie History, Lies About Our Past That Refuse to Die by Professor Peter Charles Hoffer. And thank you so much for attending. We'll post this recording on our YouTube channel, and you can follow the thread of discussion at our Twitter account as well. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks so much.
All right, take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.